Hello and welcome back to RPMbassy. Today I'm doing a record that I was quite upset to discover is nearly 20 years old. In a couple of months' time it will be 20 years old, and that it really bothers me because I remember when this came out and it does not feel like it was 20 years ago. But it is the album Hold Your Colour by Pendulum. So I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Pendulum. They are a drum and bass band from Australia but based in the UK, certainly at least at the time of this album coming out. This is their debut album following a huge string of singles. This is kind of just sort of a summation of the singles they released like the 2 years prior, basically. But I think it's quite a special album, certainly for me personally. This kind of got me into a lot of drum and bass, which for some people probably is sacrilegious, because I know that a lot of quote-unquote true drum and bass producers were not big fans of these guys. But I think for me, this kind of, at the time, hit the perfect balance of accessibility while still being, you know, electronic drum and bass driven music. And the songs really still hold a special place in my mind. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So the sort of, as I say, the initial sort of release of this album is basically kind of just to sum up the sort of 2 years beforehand that the band had releasing singles, lots of double A-side singles. So I believe out of the sort of full album, I think there's only 5 tracks that weren't ever singles, and this is actually the expanded version. So the original vinyl release was the non-singles that were sort of collected together. So the initial vinyl release of the album was only original songs, whereas this is essentially the equivalent of the deluxe CD version. So this is a 3 LP set, so you go all the way to F in terms of sides. But the overall kind of layout is basically the same. The only song that you don't get on here that you may get on a deluxe version is the song Axle Grinder, which is probably my least favourite song sort of from this era anyway, so not too much of a big deal. Probably the song that most people will know from this album is the song Slam, which I think, certainly for me, the music video in my memory is kind of like the first viral music video that I can think of, certainly like in the internet era. It would have come out around the sort of time where video streaming was becoming more of a thing, and it wasn't that long before YouTube came out, and I vividly remember seeing that video with the, you know, this large rotund businessman taking his shirt off and dancing in the street with a CD player playing the song Slam. And yeah, that kind of hooked me, really. I think that is just like such an ingenious level of marketing. It's such a simple video as well. I mean, they basically, did they even get any like releases for people walking by on the street to use their likeness? I have no idea. It seemed pretty kind of guerrilla all in all. It's like they basically just told the guy to do it, paid him some money, and then pointed a camera at him and called it a video. But you know what? It absolutely works. So the album did pretty well, certainly in the UK, and it did get a chart position in Australia as well, 77. In the UK, it hit number 29, and then dance and independent albums, it hit number 2 and number 1, respectively. Yeah, it certified, I believe, gold in Australia and platinum in the UK, over 300,000 copies in the UK. When that happened, I'm not sure, but certainly when this first came out, I remember it feeling like a really big release. Like everybody I knew had this. Although granted, some of the people didn't have legit copies of it, so whether or not anybody was actually buying it, who knows. As I say, the song Slam is kind of the one that everybody remembers from this. Maybe you've got things like Tarantula, which is also a very popular song. Fasten Your Seatbelt as well, very popular. Again, all singles. But for me, it's kind of the deep cuts, the ones that were only on that initial vinyl release, that are actually the really, really key ones. Particularly Girl in the Fire. So I remember when I first listened to the album, Girl in the Fire was a track that I would very regularly skip because it had an acoustic guitar intro, played by Perry Gwyneth, who ended up becoming the guitarist for the band, like as in a full-time position. And I remember like not really being into the song, and then like one day, you know, a while after I got it, I actually sat down and just listened to the song, and it is such a great, fun track. It's so poppy and so kind of like dance coded almost. Yeah, it's really, really fantastic. There's a lot of funk to the synths. It's like unapologetic in a way, but like unapologetically fun. Other tracks on here, I mean, start to finish, it is pretty banging. I would say certainly from the single releases, the really ideal one, if you can get hold of it, is the single release of Hold Your Colour and Still Grey. So obviously Hold Your Colour, the title track of the album, that is probably the most focused like rock song equivalent for this kind of era of Pendulum. And I know, again, like a lot of people, when they went on to do their second album, In Silico, a lot of people were very unhappy with how they sort of had shifted more towards that kind of sound of like a traditional band but with electronic elements. But that was always present, you know, like the thing that always gets me is like when people complained about Rob Swire starting to sing and stuff like that. It's like, well, it's not starting to sing. Like, he did it on the debut album. The first single they ever put out, I'm pretty sure, was Spiral, and that has lyrics or vocals on it from Rob Swire. Like, it's not like a new thing, you know. They kind of had that straight out the gate, and I always found it really, really weird that people complain so much about it. But I guess, you know, if you have someone who's quite a purist about drum and bass and things like that, I could see why that kind of more band-oriented sound wouldn't necessarily appeal. But I personally really love Hold Your Colour. I think it's a great, great song. Again, like loads of people featured on it. The bass player and one of the guitarists from the band Carnival, an Australian sort of prog rock band, which is really, really cool. I wasn't aware of that until very recently. And a lot of the lyrics that were written for this song, they're actually lyrics from a song that Rob Swire was, or from a band, sorry, that Rob Swire was in as a singer in the late 90s. I think they were called Oxygen, or it was Oxygen but without the O at the beginning. So it's kind of like Zgen, I guess. But I've listened to that song, and safe to say, like, Hold Your Colour is a better use for those lyrics, in my opinion. It's cool, and like it's interesting to see where that kind of heavy band approach that they would, you know, take up more and go more in sort of like a rock oriented sound later on down the line. It's interesting to see how, like, you know, they kind of had some of that sound in the 90s with that previous band. The other side of that single, as I said, was Still Grey. Still Grey was a song that I felt never got enough attention, and for years on streaming, it was never present. It was really weird. That was one of the ones, when they reissued the album in 2007 on CD, they'd replaced a couple of songs with Blood Sugar and Axle Grinder, and Still Grey was one of the songs that got the chop. And it was a real shame, because Still Grey for me is possibly my favourite track of them ever. It's very simple, but the initial synth wash, I think, is so reminiscent of things that I hold very dearly. That kind of mid-90s, the thing that's kind of gotten really, really popular recently, actually, that kind of mid-90s sort of almost PlayStation 1 era jungle sound that a lot of people have kind of started to try and recreate more recently, and a lot of newer producers have sort of focused on that kind of sound. Still Grey kind of scratches that itch really, really nicely, and as I said, I think it's a shame that it went under the radar for so long, but it's on here, and it is on all the streaming options that I can see nowadays. I'm not sure about the CD options, but yeah, it's accessible now, which is the main thing. Other than that, like, as I say, start to finish, it is a pretty banging album all in all. Streamline, another beautiful track, very relaxing. Again, like there's kind of like ebbs and flows within this album where you've got sort of a very relaxing track that kind of follows what was a high intensity track. So for example, Slam goes into Plastic World, which is a fairly laid back song. Then you've got Fasten Your Seatbelt, Through the Loop, two insanely heavy songs. And Through the Loop, it's not the heaviest song they've ever done if you think about heaviness as like a, you know, a metal term or anything like that, but just in terms of like a kind of audio assault, Through the Loop is one of the most aggressive tracks they've ever put together, and a really fantastic use of the sample of the original Willy Wonka 1971 version film with the sort of sound clip of when they're going through the weird like tunnel, which shows them all of the horrible imagery in the film. Really cool use of that sample, and lots of great sampling across the album, to be honest. One that I'm not 100% sure of is a sample on Girl in the Fire, which is The Choice Is Yours by Black Sheep. So a lot of people know that song for the sample Engine Engine Number 9 on the New York Transit line. Like, we know that sample. But as far as I'm aware, that isn't the sample that's used on here, but allegedly that song is sampled in some way, shape or form, but I can't pick it out. So if you do know, let me know. I could probably find out if I delved deeper into it, but it was just something that I read, and I'm just a bit curious about that, because I can't, in my head, I can't imagine where those two songs marry up. And none of the sounds in the original track make sense to me, unless it's very, very buried, in which case, like, I don't quite know why they used it as a sample, because I can't hear it. So yeah, weird one there. So if you're after a copy of this album, surprisingly, despite it being a 3 LP set, this is remarkably inexpensive. I think like when I got it, it was about £22, and I've looked since, and it's basically the same. Like, there are places selling it for around that £20 mark, which I think that's what records should probably max out at anyway. You know, HMV would disagree. They've got stuff going at £50 for a single LP, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think £20 nearly, or just above £20 for what I would consider is now sort of coming up to be a classic album, 20 years old. You know, despite the kind of poorly aged Vector Flourish kind of artwork on the front, I think like sound-wise it's excellent. And the tracks on here, if you are only familiar with their big songs and something like Slam, I think you might be quite surprised by the sort of hidden bits and pieces on here, the little gems. As I said, especially Girl in the Fire and Still Grey. If you're not familiar with them, do check them out, because they are excellent songs, and this is an excellent album. So yeah, at that sort of price, I mean, you've not got a lot to lose. I say grab a copy. It's dirt cheap for what it is, that 3 LP set. You'd be silly not to. Yeah, so I hope you grab it, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.